Chesco Holt, Louis Quest, Margo Hill, ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good evening. My name is Margo Hill, and I'm happy to welcome you to Spokane, Washington virtually. We are so pleased this year to be sharing Sisters Rising. We also have here our filmmakers joining us, and one of the stars in the film, Lisa, is going to be joining us. So we're just here tonight, and we are super thankful to have this opportunity and this platform. Of course, we want to thank our sponsors, Eastern Washington University and Spokane Teachers Credit Union. We appreciate your support. Let's get on to the film. So Willow, thank you so much for joining us. I really loved your film. I think it has a powerful message. I served as attorney for my tribe for 10 years. I grew up out on the reservation in Wellpinit, and I've also served as a tribal court judge. So I'm really familiar with the issues in your film when you talk about tribal sovereignty, and when you talk about women, transforming women. Can you tell me, just tell our viewers a little bit about how this project came about? Yeah, and a little bit about yourself, your background, please.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I just want to note, that's amazing that you're an attorney and have all this experience. I'm like, did we pass muster with our descriptions of tribal law and the difference with state, federal? Because we were just like tripping all over ourselves trying to understand, as are most people. I mean, it's so complicated. Yeah, I know Lisa Brunner probably spent like hours trying to describe to Brad and I the ins and outs of the law and like who's supposed to respond. It's different kinds of crimes, different perpetrators, different victims, etc. It was just like a total, I'm only thinking of swear words. It was because I'm tired. I'm on the East Coast. Anyways, it was very, very confusing. And I feel like, for a 60-minute film, we tried to pack in a lot of information. Sometimes I'm like, did we do right by it? But hopefully people understood enough. We had to do sort of broad strokes a little bit, but I got started on the project with my partner, Brad Heck, who would be here with us. We're life partners and work partners, but he's feeling a little sick, so he's asleep already. But we got started around 7 years ago, and we met Patty, the young woman who teaches Indigenous women self-defense classes, and kind of through her, she was living in Fargo at the time, and we kind of discovered this constellation of women who are just incredible powerhouses, survivors, working on the ground to create positive change in their communities in different ways. So Lisa Brunner is an advocate and does many, many things. But there's also Chelsea was writing tribal law code because one thing I didn't know going into this project is that you can't enforce the law if you don't have law code written for specific crimes, which was just something that never occurred to me as someone who's not involved in the law that much. So she was writing a tribal law code to prosecute sex trafficking crimes and other kinds of trafficking crimes in the tribal law code, which they literally didn't have any code for. So you can't prosecute that crime if you don't have the code. And then, there's 6 women, kind of the big players in the film, and they're all doing something different kind of on the ground to address the problem. And we spent a couple summers in mostly North Dakota and Minnesota filming. And then it was years of editing, because it was a lot of footage that we gathered, and it's hard to figure out how to weave 6 people's stories together in a way that really flows. And it took a long time, because also we were mostly self-funding the film for the most part, until Vision Maker Media gave us a grant near the end, which thank God allowed us to hire like a professional editor who actually knows what she's doing, and things like that. But so that's kind of a long description of how I got started on the project.
So Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be in the film, and what's your role as an advocate?
So I met Brad and Willow. They were here actually on White Earth recording Patty's session on teaching self-defense here. And we just, got to visit in and talk in, and then they came back and started interviewing and, just going through the process. You were here a few times, correct? Both you and Brad.
Yeah, one time I think I just came to like cry on your shoulder and you smudged me. You were like, girl, you need help. You gave me like a little abalone shell with some, because I had just heard some like horrific stories and I was just carrying it around crying all the time. And I think after crying with you, you kind of just like held a space, Lisa, that was really kind and large enough for me to feel like, okay, I can fall apart, I can cry, and then I can stand up and keep doing this work. And yeah, but I think we drove to White Earth just to see you to do that, and then left again and then came back. So it was a few times.
Yeah. Yep. And it's so important that, in the work, no matter what capacity, that we make sure we do self-care. And especially helping. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is, that we all do self-care and find things to help release and find people that can hold space for you. So I'm honored that I was able to do that for you guys. And so I have ran a nonprofit here for White Earth called Sacred Spirits First Nations Coalition for 14 years. It was addressing domestic violence and sexual assault of Native women and Alaska Native women. Did a lot of public policy work. So with the Violence Against Women Act 2005 passing, it was the tribal coalitions. At the time, it was 16 of us that went to the National Congress of American Indians for the first time and passed a resolution. And 10 years later, we were able to check everything off on that resolution, because in 2013, we were successful in getting a mini Oliphant fix within VAWA, right? With the special jurisdiction piece. And so just a lot of program development and implementation, lots of trainings, work for national organizations. I was actually a FLETC instructor at some point, teaching domestic violence and Indian country training program for law enforcement. And it's just been incredible work and a lot of hard work, in response to what's occurring within our communities and against our people. And so I'm currently actually the director of our culture department at the White Earth Tribal and Community College and the Community Extension Service Department. And I'm also professor there, teaching Anishinaabe culture. I'm also a full-time master's in a master's class for tribal governance and administration. And I was just nominated and appointed by our White Earth Ojibwe Nation of Tribal Council to sit on our cannabis control board. So yeah, I'm all over the boards.
The question is, what don't you do, Lisa?
In your spare time. Holy cow. Well, Lisa, thank you for your work. I so much appreciate you being on the front lines. This is a very difficult subject matter. And you made a really good point about self-care. The film is very raw and really tells the story. I think that we all have to be mindful to take care of ourselves. When subject matter is very tough, please talk to somebody. If it evokes emotions or triggers, please, I invite all our viewers, please, to talk to somebody, because as Lisa states, that we really need to think about self-care. And as tribal people, we try to be there for each other and look out for each other. But sometimes that's difficult if we're living in cities or living away from some of our community, that we've got to reach out to get those services. But Lisa, thank you. And I have cousins that have been down to FLETC. Lisa's talking about the Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy, and a lot of our tribal officers go there to be trained in federal Indian law. Some of the top police in the country are located in Indian country on reservations. So a special thank you to our law enforcement. Often they do their best. There's just not enough of them. you know, in your film, Willow, you really tell the stories of a number of different women. How did you decide which stories to tell? You know, I appreciate your full spectrum from, you know, sisters and aunties that are talking about, I seen my mom go through this, because many of us as Indigenous women, really, we did live through and have our moms and aunties suffer with domestic violence. How did you decide which stories to tell?
Well, I think it was partly it was sort of out of our hands in some ways, in the sense that women would recommend other women, and it was kind of like a link, it was like a chain link, you know. When we arrived on Fort Berthold in North Dakota, which is where we spent most of our time, Dawn White was the first woman we really made a connection with. And she's the tribal law enforcement officer who's in the film. And she really, she's kind of a pillar in her community. She's like born and raised Arikara, one of the three tribes, Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara tribes on the Fort Berthold reservation. And she went, you know, she went away to the US military, and she came back and she became a law enforcement officer. And she really, she was an amazing person to meet, because she put us through the ringer first. When we first met her, she was like, who are these little white people coming here, like, you know, wet behind the ears, like, what are they talking about? What do they want? And also a lot of journalists were descending in the area because of the oil boom. And she strode into the room the first day we met her in the law enforcement office, and just like pinned us to the wall with this glare and said, so you're looking for some victims? And we were like, no, ma'am, Sergeant, ma'am, no, not looking for victims. We're looking for, you know, for like powerful women in this community who can talk about these issues and describe ways for positive change for the future. And she slowly kind of softened as she realized that it was a feature-length film, not just, you know, a quick story with a headline. And so slowly we kind of won her over. And then once she decided we were okay, she gave us a bunch of names for other people we should connect with. And then also Patty, the first woman, who is how we kind of got into this whole project. That's how we met Lisa on White Earth, and a number of the other women. So it was really word of mouth. And it was kind of a self-selecting group, in the sense that, like, I would contact someone and see if they were willing to talk to us. And maybe it was a little bit of time of building some trust and relationship. And then if they decided to work with us, then they were in the film pretty much.
One thing that I really liked is that you gave the full range. You know, you not only talked about the victims and told their stories, but you also talked about the advocates and the people that, you know, are trying to get services. You know, so often our stories don't get told, we're not believed. And it makes it really challenging. But to have a law enforcement officer, you know, I know that we've only had maybe one or two tribal females even be a law enforcement officer, because again, male dominated field, and they don't necessarily want women on the force. So I really appreciated that you had a wide spectrum. Was it important to you once you kind of explained the story, the harm that was done, to bring them out of that, to get to you know, the empowerment of women?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I had any role that I played in that directly. All the women in the film are very much survivors, like incredibly powerful people who have, you know, they've been through a lot, but they worked through a lot of that trauma to come out to a really strong place on the other side. And there was actually one young woman that we did film with that we ended up not including in the film, because it felt, even though of course she gave consent to be filmed, I wasn't sure that she was really, a lot of the women in the film describe an almost like a hero's journey kind of arc, a personal arc in their own life, where they felt like they were victimized, they were shattered at that point, or maybe many times, and then became a survivor and then an activist. So many of these most of the women in the film, they're working to prevent what happened to them or their moms or their aunties or their sisters from happening to the next generation. And in a way, so the people we included in the film are all already at that incredibly empowered place themselves. But I felt like personally, me as the filmmaker, I also went through that journey while filming. Like when I arrived on Lisa's doorstep, completely shattered and crying all the time, I was kind of in a victim place myself, just holding all those stories. I felt really like my innocence was shredded. And it's not like I was all that innocent going into the project. My grandmother was a victim of domestic violence. There's gendered violence in my family, whatever. But holding all of those stories was really difficult for me and my partner. And we were making bad edits in the beginning. That's partly why it took so long to finish the film, is that I almost feel like the first couple edits that we made of the stories were very, it was so trauma focused that it was almost impossible to watch because it was so difficult. And we had to kind of like ourselves crawl to a survivor place and then an activist place in the process of editing the film. And so years of work, we were able to come to a point where we were maybe somewhat as empowered as the women in the film itself, you know what I mean? So it was quite a journey. I don't think, even if we had had more funding, I don't know that we could have done it faster, because it did take a long time to metabolize those stories and do justice. Because I was like, there's no way we're going to have won the trust of these incredible people, some of whom told their stories for the first time, and then not do right by those stories. We had to know that we were doing justice to the stories, and that just took time.
So Lisa, what were some of the messages or stories that you felt were really important to be part of this film? When you got involved in the project, what were some of the things that you really wanted people to know?
What I wanted people to know, well, one, I just appreciate and love Willow and Brad because, they are authentic and genuine and what they were wanting to do. And what I wanted people to know was that we're still here. The United States government does a very good job of ensuring our invisibility. And so it was to be an echo of the voices of all of the women in our communities that don't have a chance to even, say what happened to them, and who did it to them. I also wanted to bring to light the jurisdictional complexities that all of our tribes and the people within our tribes face, especially, victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, sex trafficking, murder, all of these pieces, and the complexities and not just the jurisdictional complexities, but the jurisdictional barriers to our safety. And, with Oliphant, right? When the United States Supreme Court stripped our tribes in 1978 of criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians. That's why Violence Against Women Act of 2013 was so critical and so important, because it was a mini restoration of that, where tribes could now exercise that criminal jurisdiction that we hadn't been able to do since 1978. And just to bring to light that we are the least protected in this country. We are the most encroached upon as a tribal community. Our treaties are consistently being encroached upon. And that non-natives, yes, do our own people commit crimes against each other? Absolutely. But when we look statistically, the majority of those that commit these crimes against us are non-native and predominantly white. And so just raising the consciousness for this country to pay attention to, the systemic genocide and systemic racism, right? That keeps that systemic genocide moving forward. And that also knowing that we are also very resilient, obviously, right? We do heal. And for our relatives who may be watching that may be going through this, you're not alone. You have so many people around you that care about you and love you. There are multitudes of programs that you could reach out to. We care about you and we want you to be safe. And that if, love love doesn't mean someone hits you. That's not love. Right? So get the help you get help, because you know what, we're here to help you. There's many people all over the place, and that we care about you, and that we love you, and that you're needed here. And so that would be the other message, you know, just that we do heal. We are resilient. We can heal from this, but also to bring awareness to kind of like the emergency that we're in. When we look at the amount of women that are murdered due to domestic violence, sexual assault, or you know, just outright murder in this country, and you look at the NCIC data of 2016, where was it 5,716 women had gone missing and are murdered. Okay, they didn't keep that data up until that point. And what data I have been paying attention to, we're estimating around 5,000 a year since then. We are less than 2% of the United States, you know, total population in this country. And we are the women who give birth to our nations. We are the women who give birth to our future generations. And at the rate that we're falling, we don't have the privilege of time. We need to start looking at what other remedies should we be looking at to in our tribal communities. Was, you know, VAWA 2013 passing was phenomenal. Hopefully the next VAWA reauthorization has a full Oliphant fix. But as we look at from VAWA passing in 2013 to today, that's 9 years ago. And only a handful of tribes have the capacity to exercise that. So what should we be doing differently? How do we look at our civil jurisdiction that we still retain and use that, maximize that, be creative with that, to hold offenders accountable, but also to protect our communities? What can we be doing differently? We don't have enough law enforcement officers, right? They are overworked. We have fantastic officers, and my understanding, you know, a friend of mine was telling me that up in Red Lake, for example, 1 year on the force there is equatable to 3 years of working on force authorization of what they're learning, right? Skill sets, all of these types of things. That's how quickly they have to figure it out. And so how can we do things differently to create more security and awareness for our own reservations and help our law enforcement out, right? What can we be doing differently? I guess is, you know, what I was trying to get to the point when I'm saying we don't have the privilege of your time. What I mean is the privilege of of colonizers, right? Of the settlers here and their systems. Their system is very slow. It's very painstakingly slow. We know this, right? I've watched it. I've lived through the whole stinking thing. We don't have that privilege of time, so we just need to start being creative.
Right. No, when I served as tribal attorney for my tribe, I got those declination letters from the U.S. Attorney's Office. We had violent crimes on our reservation, and they were the U.S. Attorney's Office were declining prosecution. You know, we didn't have enough evidence, or it wasn't a good case to take, all of those things. And now, because of films like Sisters Rising, and because we have Indigenous women in Congress, right? Namely Deborah Holland and Sharice Davids. It takes us having Indigenous women in Congress and, you know, the Secretary of Interior to be heard. And films like this, Sisters Rising, I think is really educating folks on the issues that are going on. You know, I was out on my reservation today out in Wopinit, and I was talking to the chief of police and some of our officers, our detectives, and they're having a meeting tomorrow at our tribal headquarters with the U.S. Attorney's Office. So, Lisa, I hear what you're saying about, you know, we've been put at such a disadvantage with our jurisdictional issues. You know, we didn't ask to be moved off of our homelands and put on these concentration camps, if you will. We didn't ask, you know, for our lands to be opened up and non-Indians to move in and not to have jurisdiction over these non-Indians. It makes it a real challenge to prosecute perpetrators. You know, and in so many ways, Willow, I think your film tells the story, and you brought in some of the experts, the advocates, and those folks that are working on the law and order codes, some of those gaps that we have. I found it interesting that you also had footage from testimonials before state legislatures. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? Was it hard to get that footage, or were those people already agreeing to participate in the film, or how did that come about?
Yeah, well, I think the footage we have of sort of in front of Congress is, well, there's Lisa Brunner giving testimony, and then there's also Sarah Deer giving testimony in support of the Violence Against Women Act reauthorizations with tribal provisions. And that was just important to me to illustrate, these arguments being put forward in front of kind of like, basically there's two ways to restore tribal sovereignty. At least like the most obvious legal ways, I guess, are through changes that enacted by US Congress to restore tribal sovereignty that has been illegally eroded, or through the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, I think, has been the largest taker away of tribal sovereignty through the Oliphant decision, 1978, right? I'm already getting rusty. Yeah, 1978. And increasingly SCOTUS is looking like less likely to be an avenue for positive change right now. But Congress is still I'm very hopeful about change that's possible with congressional decisions. And so we were sort of including these congressional moments where people are making the argument that, both the problem and then the solutions, or one parts of the solution being restoring tribal sovereignty, is just a no-brainer. Like, if you can't protect yourself, perpetrators figure that out and they go after you, because they're like, well, as Sarah Deer says, you're a safe victim. They're more likely to get away with it if they perpetrate against a Native woman on tribal land. And that's exactly what we're seeing, and so, we're hoping that long-term, I mean, I don't know how realistic this is, but that Sisters Rising is a tool for congressional change, legislative change, and social change, that people can see. You can't change a problem you don't know about. So a lot of non-natives don't know about this issue. A lot of non-natives don't even know. I didn't know before starting this project that tribal courts, tribal police couldn't enforce the law against non-native perpetrators. That just blew my mind. It's like, that doesn't sound right, because it's not right.
Right. I teach federal Indian law, tribal planning, planning law and legislation, a whole range of classes. And my students, when I explain to them federal Indian law and jurisdiction, they'll be like, wait a second, but Professor Hill, if I go into the state of Idaho or Oregon, I'm subject to those laws. And so they just don't understand why it wouldn't be the same for Indian country. And yes, I'm like, right?
Yeah, that's Sarah Deer said the exact same thing. And she said students were like, even if I go to another country, I still know that I can't do something like assault a police officer in another country, which is exactly what white men did in the Oliphant decision. They assaulted tribal police officers. And then they were like, oh, well, you guys are basically like another country to us. I mean, on the reservation, you guys are like, it's this whole other, you're sovereign, right? So I didn't understand your sovereign laws. Well, in what country is it okay to assault a police officer? As far as I know, it's not okay in any culture, society, country, anywhere. So yeah, it's an absurd double bind.
Right. And I think there's still a small bit of hope at the U.S. Supreme Court. In 2001, we had Justices Sandra Day O'Connor and Justice Stephen Breyer come out and visit our reservation, out the Spokane Indian Reservation, and see our tribal court and see our community. It's my hope that U.S. Supreme Court judges will follow the law, right? We have canons of construction that say you have to read the law in a light most favorable to the tribe, how the tribe would understood it. But we just didn't win cases at the United States Supreme Court from the Oliphant decision on through the 80s into the 2000s. There have been justices, even though they're conservative, that have found, like Justice Gorsuch, have found in favor of tribal issues. So, I'm hoping that at some point we'll get some justice, if you will, when it comes to having jurisdiction over violent perpetrators within Indian country. But I think that as you guys have pointed out in your film, Willow and Lisa, in the statements that you shared and the story that you told, that we have to attack this issue on every front. Not only, I have 2 daughters that are at college, and it scares the hell out of me when I see the statistics across our urban centers. What our women are still continuing to go through today, whether it's Seattle or Alaska or Minnesota, all across our country. You guys have told those stories. But Lisa, if you were going to have a message for our young daughters, or for my daughters, or young Indigenous women out there, what would that message be?
That message would be, watch your back. Take self-defense courses. The reason being is that research on sexual predators look for weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And if you walk with your head down, if you continue to stay not aware because you're being distracted by your cell phones, long hair. I mean, there's a whole cadre of like victimology of what they look for, but they're looking to choose a victim that does not fight back. One, they're looking for vulnerabilities of the fact that just us being Native, we're vulnerable. We live in modern day times of cowboys versus Indians. We are sovereign women of sovereign nations, so we're targeted specifically because of who we are as Native women. Has nothing to do with the color of our skin. If that were so, violence against all beautiful brown-skinned people in this country would be equitable, but it is not. We face the highest rates of violence in the country. So if you take self-defense course, you walk differently, you walk with confidence, and you are least likely to be a selected potential victim to a predator, because they want somebody that is going to be weak and meek and will not fight back. So, get tasers, get whistles, use your voice, but most importantly, know how to fight. The other point is watch each other's backs. We're at a time where we see so much of degrading each other and tearing each other down. This is the time when we really need to be banding together and really looking to protect each other. If you're going to go out to parties, one of you, who's ever in your group, stay sober. Don't even drink anything that is being offered to you. Bring your own water, bring whatever you're going to drink. Don't leave it unattended. Always have someone there paying attention, watching you. If you're going out to bars or things of that nature, same thing. Don't accept drinks. Pay attention to who's pouring your drink. Pay attention who's handling your drink. Those. I mean, we shouldn't have to live in this society that we live in today, but unfortunately, it's here. And so, just watch each other, watch your back, learn how to fight, stay alert, pay attention to your surroundings. And it's not that we need you to be hypervigilant, and I don't want you to be afraid, because you should be able to be carefree and enjoy life. But we also need to be mindful of our surroundings, and because there's just sick, dangerous people everywhere, and it can happen anywhere at any time. So just, be careful there. And then to our young men watching, protect us. That's your job. Culturally, that was your role. You see something, say something. Intervene, do what you need to do to ensure that, one of our young women is not being harmed. And watch each other's backs, right? And if you need help, go to your elders, go to law enforcement, go to whoever. And to our young women, should you be unfortunately experience being victim of domestic violence or sexual assault, please go, don't want, especially after sexual assault, go to law enforcement, go to the hospital, make sure they get the evidence collection. I know it's not a, it's not the best experience ever, but it has to be done. And talk to law enforcement, give them what they need, and get that end, make sure, advocates will come to you, talk with them, rely on them, rely on your friends, rely on your family. Don't keep that bottled up inside you, because that'll hurt you the most. And it's not something to be ashamed of. The only ones that need to be ashamed are the ones who are committing these crimes. That's not yours to carry, that's theirs, right? So stand tall, stand proud, and pay attention, and keep your head up. Miigwech.
Lemlem slacht. Oh man, thank you, Lisa. Those are such good words. That's powerful. I appreciate both of you in your work. This is a powerful resource that we can share out. Again, Lisa, thank you for serving on the front lines. We are doing a number of things here in Washington. We have Deborah Leakenoff. She's a Washington State Legislature, an Indigenous leader, and she has bills before our state legislature. To our tribal elders, our aunties, Patsy Whitefoot of the Yakama Nation. She has a young group. Not only does she testify before the state legislature, and recently our Attorney General, Bob Ferguson, put forward, we have a task force working across the tribes, both in our rural reservation communities to our urban core. We're doing that task force across the state. My partner and I have worked with AT&I to have tribal liaisons for Washington State Patrol. But when you talk about at the individual level, Lisa and Willow, through your film, you've told this, it's so important for our women to be empowered. It makes me think of, at the Yakama Nation, they have a youth group called the Little Swans, and the tribal elders mentor those young little girls, and you can see them in their blue wing dresses, taking part in ceremonies and learning the songs and dance of their ancestors. So they are empowered and stronger their identity as Indigenous women. So, wow, your words just touch me. And Willow, thank you so much for your film. What is there some next projects on the horizon, or is there something else that you're working on? What's next in store?
Well, Brad and I just have started filming with this elderly man here in Southern Vermont who he rehabilitates birds, and he's 83 years old, and he's just an incredible person. And he does metalsmith. He's like a blacksmith, and also carves incredible creatures out of wood. He'll just sees like a wood burl, and he'll see a face in it or something, and carve that to show it. And I think that, I know that seems like really, really different than Sisters Rising, but it is related to me in the sense that I spent years. So we made Sisters Rising, and I also made Break the Silence, about women's sexual and reproductive health histories and stories. And so I've spent years, around these incredible, powerful warrior women, and thinking about gender violence and really dark stuff around that, which, basically means male violence. So like female strength and male violence. And I think that I've spent so much time doing that I'm really hungry for really sensitive, thoughtful, like male tenderness. And this elderly gentleman in the wilds of Vermont, he's an incredibly sensitive, gentle person. He repairs animals, is his work. And I think that I'm sort of psychologically or emotionally trying to balance, I love women warriors, and I love very, very tender, sensitive men. And so that's kind of the tender, sensitive men is what I'm focusing on in this next chapter of work. So it might seem unrelated, but it's actually very related.
Okay. All right, Willow. Well,
Yes.
again, thank you guys so much for joining us. We are going to be having, my partner, Jeff Ferguson, has been asked to curate a show for Gonzaga University. So on March 4th and 5th, we will be hosting a art, three-dimensional art and the spoken word and videos down at the Guac in downtown Spokane on the subject of murdered missing Indigenous women. So we are trying to bring awareness, bring education, and I just so much appreciate you guys joining our film festival here at SpIFF this year. It was a powerful film, and the stories you told across the spectrum from, you know, not just victimology, but also the empowerment, law enforcement, and self-defense. I just really appreciate it. And then, of course, folks like Lisa, the advocates out there on the front lines. So Lum Suluk Lakt, I thank you, my friends, and thank you for your powerful work. And please go out and watch Sisters Rising. We sure enjoy and appreciate you at the film festival this year. Lum Lums.
Thank you, Margo.